The DNA sat in an evidence bag for 5 years. It could have cleared an innocent man on day one. Instead, it took 2 wrongful convictions to open that bag. To understand how we got here, we need to go back 6 years before that garage door ever opened. Georgetown, Indiana, population 2,200, a town where nobody locks their doors. Camm grew up here. She built a life here, senior accountant, quiet, steady, the kind of person who held a family together without asking for credit. She married David Camm in 1989. He was a state trooper, rising fast, emergency response unit within months. By 1993, their son Bradley was born, full of energy, loved swim practice, loved his dad's Thursday basketball games. In 1995, their daughter Jill arrived. 5 years old by the time this story turns dark, small, trusting, buckled into her car seat every single day without question. Kim built a home on Lockhart Road, named after her husband's family, roots that ran generations deep. By the year 2000, David left the state police for a better schedule. More time with his kids, dinner at home every night. Kim's sister said it plainly. Kim had everything she wanted. Then came a Thursday in September, and everything they built ended in under 15 minutes. September 28, 2000, a Thursday like dozens before it. Kim picked up the kids from school, swim practice for Bradley, dinner normal. David left for his church basketball game at 7 p.m. 11 other men were there. 3 games played. Around 9:20 p.m. David drove home. 5 minutes, ordinary drive. He pressed the garage door opener. The door lifted, and the first thing he saw was blood. Kim was on the concrete floor. He ran to her, held her. He said later he knew from her eyes she was already gone. Then he thought of the kids. The family Bronco sat parked in that same garage, door cracked open. Jill was still in her car seat, 5 years old. The attack had been sudden. She never had time to react. Bradley was different. His body was stretched toward the back of the vehicle, like he'd been trying to climb away. He was still warm when David pulled him out. David started CPR anyway. There was nothing left to save. David called it in. The dispatcher put him on hold. He stood in that garage, surrounded by his family, listening to hold music. Police arrived within minutes. 3 bodies. One detective, 33 years on the job, called it one of the worst scenes he'd ever processed. But 2 details didn't fit the obvious story. Kim's shoes were missing from her feet. They were sitting on the roof of the Bronco, side by side, toes pointing outward, deliberately placed. And on the garage floor beside Bradley, a gray sweatshirt that belonged to none of them. Inside the collar, written in marker, one word, backbone. Investigators bagged it, set it aside. It didn't fit the theory already forming in their heads. 3 days later, they arrested David Camm. The prosecutor, Stan Faith, arrived that night and made a decision within hours. David wasn't a person of interest. He was the suspect. Every piece of the investigation would now be built to support that single conclusion. To make the science fit, Faith brought in a forensic analyst named Robert Stites, introduced to the room as a professor and a crime scene reconstructionist. The most experienced detective on scene pulled his superiors aside that same night. He said this man didn't look qualified to be there. He was told to stand down. Stites examined 8 microscopic blood drops on David's basketball shirt. He called it high-velocity impact spatter, the kind of blowback pattern that only comes from a gunshot at close range. He testified he was 100% certain. Investigators built the arrest warrant around those 8 dots. But there was a problem that would not disappear. 11 men could place David at that church gym until after 9 p.m. 11 separate witnesses. No contradictions. Kim's family endured this in real time. A husband and father, arrested within days, while the actual physical evidence pointed somewhere else entirely. If you're new here, this channel goes deep into cold cases like this one, the investigations, the failures, and the ripple effects that follow. Subscribe to Ripple Effect Stories so you don't miss where this one goes next. To make the timeline work, investigators theorized David slipped out during the second game, driven home, committed the murders, driven back, all inside 15 minutes. 7 of those minutes left over for a triple homicide. Then came a phone record, A call from the Camm house at 7:19 p.m. while David claimed to be at basketball. Investigators called it proof he was lying. Except Indiana straddles 2 time zones and the billing system logged it wrong. Corrected, the call was made at 6:19 before he ever left for the game. The evidence collapsed. With no weapon, no witness, and no timeline that held together, investigators shifted strategy. They stopped building the case. They started building the man. They surfaced years of infidelity, 12 women, some affairs, some pursuits. None of it was evidence of murder, but it didn't need to be. It only needed to make a jury dislike him enough to stop caring about the alibi. That's exactly what happened in February 2002. Guilty, 3 counts of murder, 195 years. David was led out in handcuffs, into the same system he'd served for a decade. And in an evidence room, a gray sweatshirt sat untouched, waiting. In 2004, an appeals court overturned the conviction. The 12 women, the court ruled, had unfairly poisoned the jury without ever being connected to the murders themselves. For a moment there was hope, then a second trial was announced almost immediately. But before it began, David's defense pushed on the one piece of evidence nobody had properly explained, the sweatshirt. 2 unknown DNA profiles sat on it. The prosecution had claimed the database search came back empty. The defense didn't believe it. They fought for a court-ordered retest. This time, the match came back within hours. The male DNA belonged to a convicted felon with a documented pattern cornering women at gunpoint and forcing them to remove their shoes. Investigators had a name for him already. He'd been released on parole weeks before the murders. Now look again at that crime scene. Shoes removed, placed side by side, toes pointing outward, bruising on the tops of Kim's feet that had never been explained. It was his signature, sitting in plain sight for 5 years. Investigators also recovered a palm print on the Bronco's passenger door. It matched the same man. DNA, palm print, signature, all 3 pointing away from David Camm, and Floyd County still didn't let him go. Admitting David was innocent meant admitting the entire investigation had failed for 5 years. So instead of releasing him, prosecutors arrested the real match and gave him a choice. Face a triple homicide alone, or help keep David in the case. He took the deal. His story shifted with every session, first denying he knew David at all, then admitting a basketball court connection, then placing himself at the scene delivering a gun, then claiming a scuffle he barely survived. Investigators didn't press him on the parts that didn't add up. They only wanted the parts that kept their original suspect in place. His girlfriend later told a different story. Him coming home after midnight, breathing hard, holding a gun, insisting they all sit down and watch the news together the next morning. She left him 2 weeks later. She said something in him had broken. Meanwhile, the original prosecutor, now a private attorney, turned out to have a personal, undisclosed connection to the real killer's family. Phone records showed dozens of calls to that same prosecutor's office in the 2 weeks before an arrest was even made public. The real killer was convicted first, in exchange for testimony against David. Trial 2 followed in 2006, this time with a new, unsupported theory about David and his daughter, one the medical examiner destroyed under oath as having no evidentiary basis. Behind the scenes, a DNA analyst testified she'd been pressured, even threatened, to falsely place David's DNA on that sweatshirt. She refused, and it nearly cost her career. A fingerprint analyst said the same thing happened to him. Guilty again, life without parole. Then the prosecutor overseeing that conviction was found to have signed a book deal about the case while actively prosecuting it. 2 years crawled by before the Indiana Supreme Court removed him and issued a public reprimand. A third trial was ordered in 2013, moved out of the county entirely. This time, forensic experts placed the original 8 blood drops under a microscope. Trapped inside them, fabric fibers. Proof the blood had transferred by contact, not gunshot missed, exactly what David had said from the very first night. Then came the final collapse. The original forensic expert had no PhD, no professorship. He'd fabricated every credential. Under oath, he admitted it. His science had been performance, not fact. October 24, 2013. Not guilty, every count. David Camm walked free after 13 years. and after wrongful imprisonment that had already cost him far more than a number could measure. The ripple from that garage never stopped moving. It moved through David, 13 years, 3 trials, a life rebuilt from nothing. It moved through the real killer's family, a girlfriend who left, convinced something in him had broken permanently. It moved through the analysts who refused to lie and were threatened for it, careers put on the line to protect the truth. It moved through the justice system itself, 2 prosecutors publicly disciplined, a fabricated expert exposed on the stand, a county forced to confront 13 years of its own failure. And it moved through a community that had to watch its own police department, its own courts, protect a false conclusion instead of correcting course when the facts changed. Kim was 35, Bradley was 7, Jill was 5. They never got to see any of this play out. Their names are the reason this case still matters. One decision, made in the first hours of an investigation, cost 13 years, 3 trials, and nearly buried the truth for good. This case is a reminder that certainty is not the same as evidence, and that the cost of getting it wrong doesn't stay contained to one courtroom. It ripples outward into every life it touches. If this story moved you, subscribe to Ripple Effect Stories. Every week, we uncover the cases where one moment changed everything.